We're across live now to United States in New York. This is where we find SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Peace. Sherwin, today one commentator after the other has spoken of a historic political comeback. Donald Trump is returning to the White House.
Certainly a historic political comeback. He becomes the first U.S. president-elect to win a second term in office after having lost a term, right? And so this is a non-consecutive return to the White House, the first time a president-elect has done that in over 100 years. Not only a good night, Mfundo, for Donald Trump, but certainly a good night for Republicans writ large. They retake control of the United States Senate, while the House of Representatives remains in play. Any silver lining here for Democrats would be to sneak a victory in the House of Representatives, but that is increasingly looking unlikely. So a terrible night for Democrats is pretty much how we can define this. A terrible night for Kamala Harris. And what points to the Trump victory here, right? We have been talking for weeks now about the Electoral College, the crucial nature of those swing states. And if we look at the board behind me, Donald Trump winning North Carolina first last night, one of the key swing states. That initially gave us an indication of where this trajectory, where this race might be heading. Then he won Georgia, closing the gap for a possible Kamala Harris victory at that point in terms of the Electoral College. She then needed to win all three of those Midwestern states. She needed Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. She then lost Pennsylvania. Late last night, they called Wisconsin for Donald Trump, and that put him over the 270 margin at current status, around 277 votes. So beyond the threshold required to win the Electoral College and therefore the White House. So a fantastic night for Donald Trump, certainly with certain implications for domestic policy and global policy around the world. I think everybody's sort of sitting at the edge of their seats to see how this plays itself out.
Indeed, this is where the conversation has shifted to, where a number of commentators now are talking about what Donald Trump 2.0 would look like globally, for global conflict, for economies across the world. But how is the mood this very hour? Because leading up to the elections, the divisions became quite apparent in America.
Well, we haven't heard from the loser in this election, right? Kamala Harris has yet to address the public. She has yet to take the American people into her confidence. So I think that will sort of frame how this plays itself out. What we expect Kamala Harris to do is to concede the election, to accept the results, to reaffirm America's democratic institutions, and to really reaffirm kind of what she had been saying in her closing arguments, right? She would say things about, we are stronger together. She was open to having people that disagreed with her, giving them a seat at the table. So one expects her to say similar themes, but there's no question, Mfundo, that half of this country is devastated by this result. Half of this country is absolutely elated by this result. This takes a lot of people in democratic bastions like New York City in particular, places like California, places like Colorado, a number of the blue states that went for Kamala Harris. People will be feeling quite defeated in this moment, right? Because in their view, the American the majority in America has overlooked Donald Trump's criminality. He is a convicted felon on 34 counts of fraud. He has been convicted in a civil trial of sexual assault. He is a twice impeached president of the United States. He would have faced a number of some legal peril in terms of federal indictments in relation to the insurrection, which they argue he fomented in terms of the election lie and not conceding the election in 2020. There is a classified documents federal indictment that is still playing itself out in the courts. And he was due to be sentenced later this month on those 34 fraud convictions in a New York City courtroom. Those will now go away for all intents and purposes. A sitting president cannot be pursued in courts. And you will remember that earlier this year, the Supreme Court made a ruling that Donald Trump cannot be held accountable for official acts while in office. So he will have free rein here. He will have a Senate that will help him appoint conservative justices, will affirm his cabinet. And if the House of Representatives goes the Republican way, that will be a broad mandate for a Donald Trump presidency and the Republicans in Congress to set the agenda, to set a different foreign policy, and certainly a different domestic policy, which includes, as Donald Trump has said in his campaign, the largest deportation of illegal immigrants in this country. What does that look like? There are over 11 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Are they going to line them up and put them in camps and put them on buses? One just doesn't know how that policy will actually come to fruition.
But when listing everything that you've just listed, which were issues when it comes to Donald Trump's candidacy, it's then quite telling of what citizens prioritized in America here, that perhaps immigration was that one decider for most of them.
Well, the exit polls indicate to us that the top issue in this election was the economy, and followed closely by immigration and border security. The issue of abortion access and reproductive rights was further down in terms of importance. And Mfundo, if we look at some of the demographic breakdown, this really tells you, really affirms what I'm saying. White men going for Donald Trump, 59% to 39%. White women, we thought white women were going to turn out based on some of the polling we had seen in the last iterations of the campaigns. White women breaking for Trump, 52% to 47%. Only black women, 92% voted for Kamala Harris. All the other metrics really favored Donald Trump in this election. So he has received a broad mandate. Why? Because abortion wasn't as important as we might have expected. It was the economy, right? To quote James Carville, the former Bill Clinton advisor in the 1992 election, it's about the economy, stupid. That certainly rings true this morning.
Quite interesting data there. But then we understand that also some commentators now are bringing up the conversation around Joe Biden having pulled out too late, where they're saying essentially he set up Kamala for failure in this instance, that if there's ever going to be a conversation that is had among Democrats, it's one around that indecision, that they took far too long to take a decision on whether perhaps he should pull out.
Yeah, we're in that grey area, Mfundo, right? As the election is still not over. There are still ballots being counted in places like Arizona, in places like Nevada, in places like California, Hawaii, Alaska. And already we are pontificating about what might have been the result of this. The truth is no one knows. There's a lot of speculation about whether, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Biden should have done this, Biden should have done that. What Biden did when it became clear that he wasn't up to the job anymore, right? Based on that debate performance in January, he was placed under a lot of pressure by the Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's of the political party, including, we understand, Barack Obama, the former president, and so stepped aside. I'm sure we haven't heard from Joe Biden yet. He hasn't tweeted. We haven't seen him on camera. How's Joe Biden feeling in this moment? Because remember, he did not want to go. He believed that he stood a better chance against Donald Trump, despite that debate performance. The reality is we need to let the chips settle as they may to really understand what could have been done differently. Is this because of democratic progressive policies? Is America more conservative than we think?
Yeah.
Do we need to remind the extremes of both parties in the United States that to govern happens in the middle, and that's called compromise between the left and the right? We just don't know what it is. It could be anything here, Mfundo, maybe a little bit of everything put together. To give us an answer as to why Democrats lost so heavily last night.
It will be interesting to hear some of that analysis, that perhaps were the Democrats too liberal? Maybe, as you say, perhaps they needed to meet each other in the middle. But thank you very much for that reportage. We'll touch base with you as the day progresses. That's SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Peace speaking to us from New York.